Hello, church. Today I want us to look at the day after Jesus' entry into Jerusalem on what we know as Palm Sunday. Jesus had entered the day before, and as we talked about, he went into town with a celebration and lots of excitement as he entered town. The next day is a little different. The next day, as he comes into town, there's the experience that he has as he teaches the disciples something when he curses a fig tree that doesn't have any figs on it. In one gospel, it withers immediately, and in another, it's the next day before or on the way out that they notice that it's withered. But in either case, Jesus takes that opportunity to teach them about praying with faith. But here's what I want to challenge you to look at. I want to challenge you to read through the Gospels and look at the time between what we know as Palm Sunday, or that triumphant entry into Jerusalem, and the days leading up to the Last Supper and the crucifixion and Jesus' resurrection. Take a little time to spend in those days before, and what you quickly find out is the day after Jesus came, when he had gone back to Bethany for the night, and now he comes into town, and what happens to him? It's a really interesting story, actually. He comes into town, and the authorities are not happy with him. If you remember, the day before, he had driven the money changers out of town. He had came to town with his disciples, and people were crying out, "Hosanna!" and they were excited. Here comes the king. And the leaders had challenged him and said, stop, don't let them do that. And he had said to them, well, the stone would cry out if they didn't. So they were pretty unhappy with him on the day after. And when Jesus comes into town, they come to Jesus with his disciples gathered there, and they ask him an important question. By what authority do you do these things? By what power is really what they're asking. Who gave you the power to do these things? Jesus' response is really an interesting one if we take a minute to look at it. He said, well, let me ask you a question, and then if you respond to mine, I'll respond to yours. He said, did John come from God, or were his words from man? Now, you and I might not think much about that at first, but the chief priests and the Pharisees and the Sadducees, they went off on the side and they had this really important conversation, and they said, well, if we say that it was from God, he's going to say, well, then why didn't you do what he said? But if we say it was from man, then we're going to be in trouble with the people because they think John was from God. And so they came back to Jesus and they said, we're not going to tell you. I almost see Jesus laughing and saying, well, then neither will I tell you by whose authority or by whose power I do what I do. What was the result of all that? The leaders in Jerusalem feared Jesus. They feared what he might do. And I wanted us to be in this week, as we travel towards Maundy Thursday or Holy Thursday, as we prepare ourselves to think about what it meant for Jesus to gather for that last meal with his disciples. What did Jesus teach? And why did his teaching create such great fear in those that heard him? And why was he a threat to their power? I want to challenge you to read through that story in whatever gospel you choose. Take the time, Matthew, Mark, Luke, or John, and check it out. Take a look at the story and ask yourself the question, what were they afraid of? What were they afraid of? And then maybe we need to ask ourselves, what do we fear in these days? What do we fear that God might really be doing in our midst? That's my challenge for you today. Be blessed, my friends.